HR leaders, what's on your mind these days? Is it AI? Is it the economy? The talent market? Remote work? Retention? DEI? Pay transparency? New laws? Our 2024 Workplace Trends Report outlines how HR leaders are thinking about these challenges and what they believe will help their organizations overcome them. Want to find out what they said? Head on over to peoplemanagingpeople.com/Workplace Trends 2024 and download the report to find out.
You're listening to the first ever podcast of People Managing People. Welcome to the show. We're people managing people and we want to lead and manage them better. We're founders, we're owners, we're entrepreneurs, we're middle managers, we're team leaders. We're managing people, and yes, we do human resources, but we're not HR, at least not in the traditional sense. We're on a mission to help people lead and manage their teams and organizations more effectively. So if you want to lead and manage better, and if you want to become a better organizational leader, a more effective people manager, then please join us. Keep listening to this podcast to find the tips, tricks, and tools you need to recruit, retain, manage, and lead your people and organization more effectively. And while you're listening to the show, please subscribe and join our mailing list on peoplemanagingpeople.com to stay up to date with all that's going on. So allow me to introduce myself and what this podcast is all about. So by way of introduction, I'm Ben Aston. I'm the founder of a company called Black and White Zebra. We're a boutique media company. And what we're all about is making serious and boring things understandable and a lot more fun. And our big mission really is to help people and organizations succeed. And this is a project that I'm interested in personally. I'm on a journey myself to manage my people better, to find the best of company culture, employee engagement, talent, and human resource management. And I don't want to do it alone. So you see, the way it is that I kind of see myself as an HR person, not by choice, but more by default. And so I'm on a mission myself to get more competent, to get more confident, and to connect with others, managing people and leading people. I want to lead and manage better, and I hope you do too. So People Managing People is a community for people. Whether you're an owner, a founder, entrepreneur, middle manager, team leader, or maybe you're the real deal. Maybe you are an HR professional developing your career. This is for you. This is a community to share, to learn, and to grow. So next up, I want to introduce the real host of our podcast. And he's a guy called Tim Reitzmer. Tim is a culture creator with Spark Creations, and he's also co-founder of the Culture Assassins media company. Hello, Tim.
Hey, Ben. It's so good to be on the podcast.
Well, thanks for coming and thanks for hosting this. I'm just introing it. So Tim has got stacks of experience managing people. He's passionate about helping and equipping others to become better organizational leaders. And Tim is going to take on our first ever residency on the People Managing People podcast. So a massive welcome, Tim. And today we're going to be talking about this new community that we're starting. It's called People Managing People. And I'm going to talk to Tim about his current role as a workplace culture consultant. And then we're going to dive a little bit deeper into covering some leading and managing basics. But let's talk about people managing people for a minute, shall we? Let's talk about what we're creating and why does it matter? I mean, let's talk about people managing people. What does that mean to you, Tim?
Well, people managing people, that's a great question. What does it mean? It means that, this is a community for anyone who's leading people. Maybe you're currently leading people, or in the future you will be leading a team. Maybe you're thinking of starting a company. You will need to build it out, and you don't really know what to do or how to do it. And I think this is the community we're creating is a fun, interactive, supportive community on how to lead. It's not just for HR people or for that HR community. I think there's a lot of good insights there, and it's a little bit more than that. So we're on a mission to help people lead and manage their teams and organizations more effectively. I think that's what you said in the intro, and that's what we truly want to do.
Nice. And so, I mean, you work in HR, but would you call yourself an HR person? I mean, I've made an assumption that I say you work in HR. Would you even call yourself an HR person, or is that just me imposing that upon you?
You're not the first one to impose that, and so I kind of laugh at that because my career definitely hasn't been traditional HR. I just have a passion for people, and my background is operations, and so by default, I love finding more effective ways to engage our people, and so I landed in this quote unquote HR specific role in consulting.
So yeah, I mean, tell us about being a culture creator. What does that mean?
It's I work with a company here locally in Vancouver, British Columbia called Spark Creations, and we're a network of consultants, and my title is Culture Creator. I just have an awesome opportunity to partner with companies, small, medium, large, in multiple sectors, who really just want to elevate their culture, their workplace culture. More and more companies are now understanding that it's really a strategic advantage to articulate what do they actually stand for, and are they actually living what they stand for. And so that's, I guess, my title is a culture creator. I partner with organizations and leadership teams to help them and to guide them down a path of creating an effective workplace culture.
So yeah, I mean, let's dive into that a little bit more. So when you talk about effective workplace culture, what are the hallmarks for you of an effective culture, a healthy culture? What does that look like?
Well, it's whenever we go into a company, we love to ask a couple questions, and we typically sit down with the leadership team and we ask them questions related to culture. And so we ask questions around values and purpose and employee engagement and what's top of mind for people. Whenever we ask a question about values, it's an interesting reaction. We typically get a couple of different reactions. So leaders will stare at the floor, not want to make eye contact because they don't know, they don't want to get asked, or they look around on the wall because they hope that they're written on the wall somewhere. Or, not very often we actually get leaders who know what their values are, what they stand for. And what this to me really tells me is if leadership teams of people who are leading other people don't know what they stand for, how do their teams know what they stand for? How do they make the best decisions? And it's just a fascinating little exercise to do. So if you're listening to this and want to put people on the spot, you may get some interesting reactions about this. But
let me put you on the spot then. So
sure, love it.
Allow me.
Staring at the wall. I'm looking at the wall.
Yeah, look at the wall. Tell me what's written on the wall. Let's talk about for Spark. So as a culture creating company, have you guys got defined values of your own?
Yeah, totally do. It's we have 3 values. It's love, connection, and fun. We love completely. We believe in bringing your whole self to work, not just, separating work and life. It's we have life and that's it. So we love completely. Connection. We're about connecting with not just internally with our network of consultants, but with our community and with our clients. So driving deep connection. And fun. If we're not having fun, we need to reevaluate what we're doing. If it's all serious, nobody's laughing, we're not sharing stories, we're not actually, wanting to get out of bed to do what we got to do, we're not having fun. So those are the 3 values that we strive for. So the co-founders of Spark Creations, Lori and Eileen, developed these many years ago, but we review them every quarter. And we're, again, a network of independent consultants, but we all have a say in are these the values we're still living? Do they still make sense within this organization?
Yeah, that's cool. I think my experience of developing values for a company is that, when you shared your values just now, I was like, oh yeah, those are good. I'll take those. And then I read someone else's values and I'm like, yeah, I mean, they're good. I'll take some of those as well. And so how do you get to the point where you're like, hey, these are ownable and meaningful? Because I think values, I mean, the reason that we define values is because they sound like a good thing. And they are, that they reflect what we want to be and how we want to act as an organization. So that we've got some organizational integrity. But how do you kind of decide or get to that point where, hey, yeah, this is a meaningful value, rather than me just saying, hey, well, I like your value of fun, so I'm going to pick that one too and add it to the pile?
Oh, that's a great question. And there's multiple ways to define values for personal values or organizational values. And one approach is just print off a list of value words and circle which ones mean something to someone. I would not recommend that approach, so don't do that. But we all have values, whether we've articulated them for our own self. But we all have personal values. So our approach at Spark is when we go into organizations, we actually ask everybody in an organization, what do they hold of value? And we run some exercise. We ask some questions to get to the heart of what those values are. And but really, we sit down with the leadership team, and it could take hours, it could take days, and we put together a list of questions. We ask some questions and we pull out key words out of those questions. So one of the questions we may ask is, who inspires you and why?
Right.
Another question we might ask the leadership team is, what fires you up? Yeah. And we start pulling out value words, and we quickly start to see a theme from those statements or their answers, even though they're all individuals, different individuals, but we start to get a theme of, what do they stand for? Yeah. And I know we're kind of going down this path of culture and values, but when you're leading people, when you're starting an organization, you got to start on a foundation, not just, cool, we got a great product. Now we got to go sell it. But, what is going to guide our decisions? How are we going to bring people on? What are we going to say yes to? What are we going to say no to? And, the famous story about values is Enron. I hope I can say Enron on the podcast, but back in their heyday, like one of their values was integrity, and then they collapsed, and a bunch of top people went to jail. Not everyone was corrupt, but if it's just written on a wall or in an employee handbook, it's just a word.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what you recommended in terms of like actionable advice for people listening, this kind of gut check, well, not even actually, it's not a gut check; it's a values check of sitting down quarterly or however frequently you decide to do it, looking at your values and then evaluating how in the last quarter or whatever period it is have we exhibited these values. Are there any examples? Are there any stories of how we've had fun as a company? And if those values really are true, then there will be, story after story of how that value has come to life. There'll be, times where you'll be recounting the fun you had, and then you're like, okay, well, yes, fun is definitely one of our values. Then that's true. We still want it to be a value, and we're living it out. There's some integrity there. But I think that approach of not just defining them and, teasing them out, but also checking whether or not they actually still hold true is really, really valuable advice.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. And, as a leadership team, or even if you're a leader of team of one, it's still something to reflect on, but also it's a great way to dive into employee engagement. So if you're doing one-on-one check-ins with your team, or you've got performance reviews or whatever process you're following, is even just have the person sitting across from you reflect on, what values have shown up in the last month, in the last 2 weeks, in the last 6 months, whatever it is. What's resonating with you? What's not resonating with you? Do we need to change anything? And it's a great reflective exercise that I recommend you do with your team.
Nice. Yeah, that's good advice. And you touched on employee engagement there, and that's obviously a good buzzword to throw around. But what does employee engagement mean to you?
Yeah, it means that our people are fired up, are excited to be doing what they're doing. They know what the purpose of the organization is. They know the vision of the organization. I believe purpose and vision are two separate things. And they know how they can contribute to pursue that purpose and vision. So if you've got a vision if you're a tech company and you have a vision to, be the first in delivering X, Y, Z, or Z, depending on where you're listening from, in your specific industry, then if your people are engaged, they know exactly how they can contribute to that vision. And so, if you stop what you're doing and if you're listening to this, press pause, get out of your desk or your cubicle or your office and go ask people and say, hey, do you know how you're contributing to this vision of the company? If you get a resounding no, you may have some engagement issues on your hands.
Yeah. And what's recently, well, at least recently for me, that I'm hearing more about in terms of employee engagement is OKRs, these objectives and key results. What's your kind of take on that in terms of a tool for engagement? There's lots of actually now software tools being developed like 7Geese, 15Five, Culture Amp, Purdue. There are some tools out there that, help us track or define OKRs and then track against them. And the idea being that employees are more engaged if they have clear objectives and key results. But then what you're talking about then is how that filters up to the overall vision of the company. And are people jazzed about and fired up about coming to work every day and about the big vision? So let's talk about like OKRs and how that kind of this gap between vision and OKRs, when we're kind of trying to translate vision into objectives and key results. How well does that work for engagement, and what other ingredients should people be throwing in there?
Yeah, I think this is a whole series of podcasts on its own, but let's dive into that maybe a little bit high level. So, I mentioned you've got a vision of an organization. So typically that vision would translate into some sort of strategic plan, whether it's a rolling strategic plan or it's a 1 year, 2 year, whatever it is. That strategic plan likely has some areas of focus. So what is your company going to do, your organization to do to achieve that plan? And then how does that plan support the vision? So, there's maybe a couple steps away or in that process, at least what I've done with other clients is really start articulating, how do people then contribute? I love the idea of, OKRs, the objectives and key results. It's measurable. It's a straightforward tool to use to measure progress. Now, let's say, let me use an example. So if you're listening and you get out of bed on a Monday morning and you don't know what you're going to do, you don't know what you need to achieve, you don't know why you need to go to work.
Yeah.
Do you think you're going to be engaged? Probably not. Is your performance going to suffer? Absolutely. I was reading a study, and this is an older one. It's from 2015. And it's a US study. And I believe 68% of people are disengaged in work. And I also found, okay, well, cool, 68% are disengaged. So what does that mean? And there's an interesting calculator, and we'll post this out, that I found on LinkedIn, a cost of disengagement.
Right.
So, if I believe it's $10,000 per $60,000 of salary. So I may be butchering that, but regardless, there's ways to measure that disengagement. So having your vision, strategic plan, focus areas, and then linking your objectives and key results, your OKRs back to that. Yeah, it gives you a sense of purpose. So let's say now you get out of bed and you on a Monday and you know exactly how you can contribute to the growth and stability and community of your organization. You know, when I say that, I feel like I'm already more engaged.
Yeah.
I know that I've got a purpose. And so there's great tools out there. I think you mentioned a number of them. I've seen Culture Amp in use. I know clients and companies who use 7Geese. So I just pick out those two, and because they're a little bit familiar with them, and it's a great way to track it. Does it solve the problem of engagement? Absolutely not. Does it replace the need to actually have conversation with your team and people? No, but it's a great way to track progress.
Nice. And so, I mean, what we're talking about here in terms of employee engagement, in terms of culture, now these are things that typically are owned, I guess, by an HR team or an HR department. And, you know, personally for my case and how in the introduction, I said, hey, this is me. I run a company and, I'm an HR person, but, you know, but that's by default, not because I've chosen to be one. And for many small companies, you know, they're not big enough to have an HR department. So I'm curious, as, you know, a culture creator that you are, I mean, I kind of cast that HR title or responsibility onto you. But, you know, as an HR person who's not an HR person, you know, I deal with recruitment. I deal with, hiring and firing. I deal with, employee management in terms of payroll and benefits, insurance, you know, all those kind of things. And yeah, I have these things because I have to do them. But for someone like me, for a lay HR person, how would you describe human resource management? What does human resources mean to you? And maybe you can, as you're kind of describing that, you can think about what are the things that someone like me who does HR because I have to rather than by choice. What are some of the things that we should be watching out for or particularly conscious of because we're not professionals? Have you got any insights on that?
Yeah, I think, you know, if you define HR, human resources, really, yeah, I did the old Google search on, you know, what does HR mean? And in a traditional sense, it's a department, maybe its own siloed department within an organization, within a business that really represents all things people or worker related. So you're effectively wearing a department hat because you are responsible for all things people related. And when I say all things, you've mentioned a number of them, from recruitment to training to hiring to running payroll to benefits to coaching, right? You probably have to once in a while put your coaching hat on because somebody has an issue, you know, personally or professionally that they want to talk to you about. You're responsible for engagement. You're responsible for labor relations, for everything falls under you. And you know, I can't see you, but I can probably imagine your face going like, oh man, that's a lot. And, but I think what can be done is sharing out some of that responsibility. We worked with a client here in Vancouver. Their company about 30 people, and they don't have an HR team. There's no dedicated HR person.
Right.
So I asked him, I asked the CEO, how do you manage it? And he says, well, they've actually kind of spread out some of the tasks. So if, you know, somebody's responsible for payroll, so they've kind of farmed that out to more of the finance side of the business, or benefits. Maybe that's somebody else, or, you know, another co-founder could take a look at and manage something else. For performance reviews, performance management, they're raising up another leader within the organization and putting some of that responsibility and to build out that framework on them. And you'd be surprised. I think people are eager to take things on and learn something new.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I have discovered that is useful is that there are tools that integrate some best practice into them. And I'm not saying the solution to all my HR woes is simply just to keep buying more tools, but there are tools that begin to integrate things like Bamboo HR is great, for example. But human resource information systems, performance management systems, workforce planning systems. There are tools out there that actually integrate some best practice. And I think when I begin to use some of these tools, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a really interesting and useful step that I should be thinking about when screening applicants for a new role, for example, or when I'm doing performance appraisals. They guide you through some of the steps that as a non-HR person, I might not think about, or I might not, consider doing, like, hey, let's have quarterly performance reviews and let's set the goals for the performance reviews. And let's have these check-ins and things begin to become a bit more automated. So, I don't know if you've familiar with any tools or any tools that you've seen used that have been particularly effective?
That's another great question. There's so many tools out there to manage your people, and I think it's right for, you kind of said it throughout the podcast, is as a business owner who is by default the HR person, is what really sitting down, what are your needs as a business owner? What do you need help with? Do you need help with in the engagement side? Do you need help on reminders of performance reviews or check-ins or whatever it is? You could use something as simple as a Google Doc or OneNote to track it. But some tools that I know that are quite popular, Ultimate Software, Bamboo HR, those ones seem to come up in a lot of my research. I haven't used them personally, but they've come up quite a bit as ways to really manage the workforce. And these aren't necessarily just tools for HR people. It's like, oh, I don't have an HR team, so I don't need it. Well, again, get out of your desk, ask your people if they're engaged, ask them, maybe not directly ask them if they're engaged, but start having those conversations, because people need that communication. They need to know where you're going, how they contribute. There needs to be a deep level of trust, and then start tracking it. And the best thing from my experience is, I came out of a tech company and managed a large workforce across the globe, and I would sit down to do check-ins with my team or performance review, and I would just go to our system and all the notes were already tracked there. So I didn't have to think back, think back a year or think back 6 months to all the projects that were completed on time or not, or things that worked and didn't work. We just tracked all the notes in a system, and it summarized it for our check-in and our performance review. So it really simplified the process. So definitely we'll have some tools for you. Check out peoplemanagingpeople.com for list of top tools, and also in the future some breakdowns on which ones work best for who. So
nice. Cool. And I mean, tools are one thing. Another thing that is obviously hugely important in our development as people managing people is the community aspect of it. And that's really why we founded peoplemanagingpeople.com in the first place. We are trying to create and birth a new community for people who manage people. For it's HR for non-HR people. And obviously we're just starting out, and so I'm curious, where else do you go? What other blogs do you read in your work as a culture creator, or what other resources do you find yourself dipping into that other people should add to their reading list?
Yeah, I've attended a lot of HR conferences this past year, as I've been with Spark now for a year. And from somebody who is a non-HR person, HR conferences are geared for HR people. So there's a lot of great conferences out there. And I know on the website, we've listed out the top 2020 conferences to check out. Please do so. Some some resources that I really find great is Patrick Lencioni. He's the founder of it's called the Table Group. So I really like what he writes. He really talks about healthy organizations and how to create healthy organizations, not from, everyone is, physically fit and that type of thing, but just, again, is your company thriving?
Yeah.
Another resource I really like is Donald Miller. He's the StoryBrand guy. He has a daily email that comes out, and it's a video cast called Business Made Simple. A lot of great tools and tips and tricks in that. So that's how I'm kind of rounding out my tool kit, if you will, just garnering that. So again, lots of great HR conferences. And I would also say, as if you're a non-HR person, right, if you consider yourself just by default, you've landed in this position, go to an HR conference, check it out. You will maybe even find your next hire, somebody who you need to bring on your team to manage your people and give you support there. But you will see and hear from industry experts that will just give you so much insight. And so definitely check it out. Check out the conferences.
Cool. Well, Tim, thanks so much for joining us, and thank you for being our resident host of the People Managing People podcast. We're looking forward to having you host various guests over the next little while. I know we've got a good lineup of guests who are booked to come on the show. So if you want to learn more about managing people, if you want to hear from other culture creators, people who are coaching people, leading organizations and managing organizations, then subscribe to our podcast and leave us an honest review, if you will. Tell us why you love us or hate us. Either way, it's greatly appreciated. And we'd love to invite you to come and join our gang. So comment on this post if you're listening to this on the website, or if not, head to peoplemanagingpeople.com to join our soon-to-be-launched Slack team, and you'll find all kinds of interesting conversations there going on about all things leading and managing people. But until next time, thanks so much for listening.